Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mindful Play Summit. I'm your host, Crystal Jensen, and today we're sitting down with Mary Gordon, president and founder of Roots of Empathy. She's recognized internationally as an award-winning social entrepreneur, educator, author, child advocate, and parenting expert who has created programs informed by the power of empathy. In 1981, she founded Canada's first parenting and family literacy centers, which are used for best modeling internationally. In 1996, she created Roots of Empathy, and for that, she has been awarded the Order of Canada and the Governor's General Award for Innovation. She has given several TEDx talks, also several dialogues with the Dalai Lama, and awarded several honorary doctorates, and spoken to and consulted with the UN and the World Health Organization. Her children's charity, Roots of Empathy, offers programs in every province in Canada and on 4 continents. Thank you so much for watching. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am sitting here with Mary Gordon, who is the founder and president of Roots of Empathy. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mary.
My pleasure, Crystal.
I'm super excited to get to know you a little bit better. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you started in working with this Roots of Empathy program?
Well, I guess I started as a kindergarten teacher and realized very quickly that there was a great inequity in the way which children presented themselves to kindergarten. So after some years, I decided to start a program in Toronto where we would work with parents and their little children from babies to the age where they started school to give them sort of an inside track on ways that they could play with their children that would help their children be more ready for school. And I don't mean teaching numbers and letters. I mean encouraging, I mean real playing and making friends, parents making friends. And out of that work, that work became very, very popular and eventually public policy. But what I learned about that was that many parents struggle with violence in the home. And I noticed that the common thread with all the violence and suffering was the absence of empathy. But I also had learned, working with hundreds of parents with their newborn babies, that having a belief that empathy is inherent, but it blooms or fades in that first year, I realized that if empathy is a missing piece in all that pain, we could cultivate empathy if we allowed all children to be able to see and be part of the loving relationship between a parent and a baby, that we could foster the development of empathy. And that was the birth of Roots of Empathy, that I would help break intergenerational cycles of violence. And empathy really is the ultimate human trait. And if we could foster that in children, not only would it decrease violence and bullying, but it would increase loving behavior, kindness, understanding, all of the things that we want for our children.
Absolutely. And at a time like this, in our world that we're living in and that we're living through, what an important piece to be able to drop in and have that awareness around. So thank you for all that beautiful creation that you've been doing for so many years. I'm curious to know a little bit more about your philosophy around play.
Yes, well, I've been a proponent of free play for many decades, it seems. And my belief is that play is intuitive, that babies solve problems in the first year of life at a rate greater than any other year in the lifespan, and that children intuitively find things out by exploring, discovery play, and that my philosophy is that yes, we can play with children as long as we don't take it over, as long as we let them take the lead and follow. But I think the richest play is play which is unstructured, play that children create on their own. And that kind of play is generally sensory as well as sometimes dramatic play. And I really don't encourage toys which have a preconceived outcome. Like things like Lego are wonderful for children, but building a particular model is not as creative as children playing with Lego and creating their own thing. I really support the idea of outdoor play, summer, winter, spring, and fall. I really appreciate the idea of indoor water play and sand play and very free play. And if you like, Crystal, I have a very small clip of a parent playing with a little girl who's nonverbal. And she's playing with Play-Doh. And the idea is, and this is the centers I mentioned to you, the parenting centers that I created way back when. The idea was this mom who does understand English, but speaks, I think, Iranian at home. So the idea would be that the little girl would learn to speak in Iranian, but she wasn't speaking at all. So the staff person, the parent worker, decided to join the mom and give the mom the role, because we don't in the centers, modeling was the way of learning and conversation, observation, not instruction. And you can see in this clip how the parent worker is explaining that the language that you use, and this little girl is just 2, the language that you use when the child is playing should be describing what the child is doing or what you're doing, not instructing this is the color green and this is the word for this, but really engaging in a very light and playful way. And here's a little clip to see.
Thank you.
Push your hand into it and it makes an indentation. And you can push the knife in and it makes a hole. Look at the holes you're making. It helps with her language if you tell her exactly what you're doing. Okay. So if you have a ball, you can say, this is like a ball, and I'm throwing the ball up in the air.
Okay. سوي شوفي معلبي لذيذ you want to try? Oh بلوت شفتي؟ Yeah good yeah صحيح جدا.
And it's wonderful that you're using your own language.
Oh,
because that's very important to talk to her in your own language.
يلا العبي خلطيها مع بعض خلطي يا خلطي مع بعض خليتي مع بعض.
It's amazing how long she's playing with it for a long time, and that's good because it increases her attention span. Anytime they're focused on a toy, you're increasing their attention span.
So Crystal, you can see there that it's a very gentle play and it's not pushy. And you can see that there are 2 plastic knives there. Generally, my philosophy is not to put a whole bunch of things in with the water or in with the Play-Doh or in with the sand to encourage children to use their fingers as digits. And you might have noticed that the parent worker said, you're making an indentation. And then she was introducing the big word, but that was for the mom. And then she was saying, you're making a hole. So she was giving a higher model, but she was really using children's language as well, and encouraging the mom for the power of, working in the mother tongue, which is the closest to the heart and to the tongue, so that it was a celebration. And typically the introduction in play, sensory play, of all kinds of tools is thought that you will encourage the children to be scientific and to be measuring. And that's a good thing, one thing, but you very often clutter it and prevent the children from real basic exploring. Because in sand, most children don't use their knuckles, don't use their fist, don't use the back of their hands. They use the tools that we put in the sandbox. And we've missed a whole creative stage by doing that. So I guess you could sum up my philosophy of saying that play is essential to a child's health. And a child who is sick doesn't play. That's how parents know their child is sick. A child who is sad doesn't usually play. And a child who's anxious doesn't usually play. So parents are really the best readers of how their child is feeling. And very often early childhood educators are very quick to spot a child who is unwell, whatever the reason is. They can notice because they're trained to appreciate the kind of play that is typical for a particular child. So all sorts of play, boisterous play, rough and tumble play, bring it on. It's all good as long as children are learning to interact with one another or to enjoy solitary play. But play at every stage of life is really important. And I think somehow or other, with all of our technology, many of us have forgotten how to play and be joyful, because real play is something that is not instruction, it's construction. And it is a source of endless joy. And I have to say, I still enjoy a good game of tag. I still enjoy hide and seek with my little grandchildren. And the joy of a baby playing peekaboo, there are versions of that right throughout the lifespan.
I love that. When you're talking, I have a big smile on my face, because what was coming to me was questioning about, how play has evolved over the last, decade, so to speak. And, you touched on the electronics and, that connection piece. And I wanted to mention too, that I too enjoy play. Before the call, we kind of brought out my little puppets to share, to show you. And that feeling of just letting go of the expectation of what play is, and to be able to be in that moment with the child, no technology, and be present. If it's a parent or educator or whoever is listening, to just be with that child, there's so much benefit for us as well to facilitate and have that child-led play. But when in my mind did I stop playing? And there's this phase of coming out of childhood and going into the preteen and adolescence, where it's like that, oh, I have to now be an adult. And from my personal experience, I lost touch in that. And I think that's why I came back to being an educator and to working with children, because that just sparks so much joy inside of me. And I would rather be going to work, I say work like this every day, playing and making a positive impact on those little children's lives, as well as my life, than sitting in a 9-to-5 office where I'm not able to play. So I wanted to share that, as so many sparks were coming up when you were speaking. So I appreciate your expertise on that.
And Crystal, another thing that I think is sad is that culturally and pretty much in education, we tend to devalue play. And also at home, parents will often say, oh, go on and play. And that is great. And to leave kids alone to play is a great thing. Our roaming space is not as far as it used to be. That children don't have as much, I guess, permission to go further away as they used to. So outdoor play is a little bit more bridled and controlled than it used to be. But the recognition that children are at peak learning when they're in self-directed play, that we don't always think that learning is very often child-directed. And children are developing competencies when they play that we value in the workspace. Collegiality and all of those kinds of things, and cooperation are developed when you play with one or more children. And that doesn't seem to be recognized in childhood as being valid. We're hooked on STEM because we can identify it and measure it. But in life, the things that are most precious are most difficult to measure.
Absolutely. Beautiful insights. Now I have a burning question. So you're most quoted for the phrase, love grows brains. So what does that mean?
Well, I guess I'm talking about the power of love between a parent and a child, and particularly with the infant and the parent, because we know in recent decades, fair to say, that emotion and cognition are intertwined in the baby's brain. And that if we want the baby to be good at thinking, to have excellent optimal brain development, it doesn't happen through instruction. It happens through love. And when I say love grows brains, I mean those early interactions between parent and infant or whomever is interacting with that baby. The number of positive, loving, gentle interactions that baby has, and behavior that is contingent, meaning we meet the baby's needs with the appropriate response, that we're able to read the baby's cues, that the baby feels understood and felt, that we follow the baby's lead. If the baby wants to look out the window, we lift the baby up to look out the window. That baby feels deeply understood, which means deeply loved. So that when you are very well loved, you learn not only to love very well, but you learn to learn very well. So early attachment relationship is crucial to brain development. And it's so interesting because neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Meltzoff, who runs iLabs out of the University of Washington in Seattle, he's often talked about early brain development, as have many neuroscientists, but he spoke at our research symposium 2 years ago, and he joked and he said, neuroscience is finally catching up to Mary Gordon. I said, what do you mean? And he said, you've always said that love grows brains. For 20 years or more, you've been saying that. Neuroscience has proven it. So I don't think parents need proof in that, but it's reassurance. It means the late nights. It means, caring for a child that's sick. It means putting the child first a lot of the time. That all of those things are cumulative and have a lifelong impact. So love really does grow brains.
That is beautiful. Thank you for that. It's really interesting when you're talking, and what keeps coming to my mind is that our children and also as adults, we learn when we feel safe, right? So it's like we feel safe, we're out of our fight or flight response, and we're open to receive because we feel safe. So that love and compassion for ourselves and for the children, I absolutely love how you've connected that. And you know what? Yes, absolutely. Neuroplasticity is catching up to Mary Gordon. You just keep paving that way. That's beautiful. So what relationships do you see between parents' attitude and a children's curiosity, creativity, and courage?
Well, I think parents are the child's first teacher, their lifelong teacher, and an indelible teacher, because oftentimes the words of our parents are still in our heads and in our hearts. I hope they're not harsh ones, but the early interactions with our parents basically teach us who we are and who we can be. And when a parent is non-judgmental, when a parent is joyful and interactive with the child they get, not the one you ordered, because you never get the child you ordered. And the idea that parental influence is so massive, and it's not necessarily determining if the child will, what career the child will take. I don't mean that, but it helps the child have faith in themselves, to trust themselves, to have courage to try. Because, even in play, if you think about it, if a parent trusts the child to climb a tree, to stand nearby, to give them lots of experience in climbing other things before they climb a tree, the child comes to trust their capacity to know what they can do and how far they can push their limits. And that generalizes to a child thinking, oh, I think I can try that next problem in mathematics, because if I get it wrong, I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to feel I'm a failure. I'm going to ask for help. So I think the parent's attitude to helping a child explore, allowing the child to fail, being obvious yourself about your own failures, recognizing that we all goof up. We all make mistakes and it's not the end of the world. And I think parents are such brilliant models for their children in terms of letting their children know it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be mistaken. It's okay to make a guess. And it was a wild guess and a wrong guess. So guess again. So I think the power of parents when they play and speak and interact with their children. In the car, there's tremendous power that you can have with your child to talk about things that you've noticed that they've tried and to really be aware. Another thing that's so helpful for parents is if they recognize their children's temperament traits. If they realize that maybe one of their children is high on risk taking, but very cautious, another child could be very cautious, it means that the parent can encourage the cautious child to be a bit more adventurous and to pull back a little bit on the high risk child, so that every child is unique in their temperament. And for a parent to be able to really nurture the child's ability to have faith in themselves and to be courageous, it's a very beautiful thing to do, because it's not something that you do through instruction. It's something that is a natural flow, and being aware and being present with your child.
I love that. What's coming to my mind when you talk, Mary, is, focusing in on that effort, right? A lot of the times we'll point out, or parents will point out, what's been done, but it's the efforts, that journey of getting to that point of whatever is happening is a beautiful celebration of the effort. Right. And, I think about like a torpedo, right? It's like, you want to get from point A to point B, and that torpedo will go off course and then it'll correct. It'll go off course and correct. And it will never get to where it needs to go unless it's been just kind of doing this. And I see that with children and development, and even my own development as I'm, a student of life and always looking to, further my knowledge. But it's that torpedo where you've got your path, but if we never veer off slightly and correct and learn and have these beautiful lessons, then that's not how we get to the other destination. That's what came to my mind when you were sharing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that metaphor. And I think another way that parents sometimes and educators can help children is that if you are playing a game, which is very different from just playing free play, unstructured, unbridled play, joyful play, a game has rules and structures, and that's fine too. Just to say, children under 6 do not lose gracefully. And if it's a big deal to win, cooperative play games are out there. But if playing a game with a child, if the adult is able to talk about, oh, that was a bad move there, now I think you're going to be able to jump me over there, the child not only learns how the parent is strategizing, but learns the attitude of the parent. And that's all important, the parent's attitude, that they can say, oh gosh, that was a pretty silly move, and I guess you're going to be winning this game. But how we look at winning as parents or teachers has everything to do with how the poor child perceives winning. And are they disappointing us if they don't get an A? And how much of their motivation is actually intrinsic and how much is extrinsic? Because if everything is other people's expectation, the poor child will be exhausted trying to live up to everybody's expectation. It's not fair. We have far too much competition and assessment and judgment with marks and grades and comparisons and judgments in children's lives as it is. And, we sort of move away from free play to sport. And sport is great for kids, great for group affiliation and all those things. But I think we always have to remember the child's emotional maturity. I know with my children who really didn't grow up with competition at home, we would see tears about losing the first year of hockey, about letting the team down and losing a game, which broke my heart because that's too much responsibility for a child. So I just want to infuse into our discussion the idea of intrinsic motivation where the child is the player. And that's what free, unstructured, unbridled play is. The child sets the goals. The child decides what they're doing. Their motivation is exclusively intrinsic versus, unfortunately, real life, which is a lot of extrinsic, other people imposing. And at home, parents have a wonderful opportunity to have a mix of the two.
Absolutely. I bring in some personal experience. My oldest is 11, and what I recognize is that grade 2, she was given spelling words that were like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Okay, so
Even though the sound of it.
yeah, right, kind of atrocious. We could sing along, but she then had a writer's block when she started to write. And when I sat with her and kind of asked her what was going on, she was so concerned about making these spelling mistakes that she wasn't free flowing in her expression. And it took us a while of allowing her to feel safe, reconnecting her mind, and actually sitting in more of like a meditative state to just get the ideas flowing for her. I said, hey, mom will write. You just use your creative. And it was like reprogramming her to let it flow. And if I wasn't patient to kind of work with her on that to find out, I wouldn't have recognized that in grade 2, this fear of perfectionism or making the teacher upset because she got it wrong or got it right really was embedded in her whole belief system up until when she was ready to fluently be writing. And it was a beautiful reflection for her and for myself as we reshaped those beliefs and allowed her to feel with the flow of just, let's forget about the writing for a moment. Let's just get those thoughts and get that imagination moving to bring back that joy and that creativity with love and compassion and releasing all of that judgment. But it's interesting that in that moment, I didn't really realize what was happening with how it was being delivered until X amount of years later, and recognizing that that moment really impacted the way that she was learning further on in life. But what an opportunity to sit and say, okay, like let's talk about these feelings. And there was actually a physical, every time she would sit and write, she would get anxious and she would have these sensations in her body with that fear of judgment, fear of doing something wrong or writing a wrong answer. And I also reflect on my own parenting because I too am working through, done is better than perfect, and recognizing my beliefs as growing up, that I didn't want to upset anybody and I wanted to be the good daughter and just wanted to be that grade A, where I'm now releasing all of that and just allowing my children to be the teacher for myself, and recognizing what I needed back then is definitely not what they need now, and how it's such a generational difference. But that awareness piece to say, wait a moment, let's just pause for a second here and let's talk about that emotional piece and allow her to express. Now she loves writing, and very similar to me, I love to just speak it out and then write it. But having her connect that and understand that she's not doing anything wrong, that sometimes certain things that we move through in our upbringing can really shape the way that we are, but we have an opportunity of awareness to work with that, and that it's okay. So it's been a beautiful journey of discovery and also hearing, certain things that she remembers. She's got this magnificent photographic memory of certain scenarios. And when you take a moment to just listen to that and be with that, I'm learning so much from her through her journey. And I wanted to share that piece because certain things we might do or say could, have that impact later in life. And we don't really know that we're doing that.
Well, I think it's a very tough line parents walk. And I am so happy to say that parents increasingly are aware of and respectful of allowing children to fail and allowing children to make mistakes and picking them up when they fall down, just like you would when a toddler is learning how to walk. And also, I think teachers are amazing. supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, as you were saying, is a tough word to spell. And there are many things in school that they're right or they're wrong. There's no in between. 2 and 2 is 4. It's not 3.5. And teachers are responsible for helping children know certain body of facts. But what I'm very impressed with teachers these days is that the teachers are nurturing the learner. They're not just being accountable for what the child knows. They're accountable for the child's way of approaching things, the child's way of speaking, the child's way of expressing themselves, whether it's in speech or in writing or in play. The teachers have a very good awareness of the whole child, and they nurture that whole child, and they have a very clear awareness that every child is unique. And of course, when you're at home, you know your children are unique, but can you imagine 25 children in the classroom? So I think teachers are our heroes, that they're not just teaching STEM, they're teaching kids that they are people who have rights, and there are people who have individual ideas and interests, and that they will be respected by the group. So I think education is looking very exciting these days.
Absolutely. I agree. And I have to share that she spelt it wrong by one letter only because dad taught her it with the one letter wrong. So I said, you spelt it right. We reshaped that memory, right? And now I'll tell you, because of the foundation that she was provided at such a young age, even though we've moved through a bit of her writing block, she is a top speller. Like, she is so in tune with her, I would say, her literacy. She is reading like the Harry Potter book series, and there's so many beautiful things that have evolved from her early learning. But it's interesting how much I'm learning in different stages of each of my children's life. I have a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, and 11-year-old. And as they're teaching me, I am shape shifting the way I am as a parent based on all of the new, because it's, you could imagine, right? The generation shifts so much, where as soon as I think I've got something figured out, then something else changes and shifts. So it's such a beautiful reflection to kind of, hear your story and hear what, the teachings and the lessons, and also reflecting on where I am as a parent as well. And, so much appreciation to the teachers out there and supporting them, because what they're working through right now is not an easy time in our world as well. And I do want to share that appreciation to our fellow teachers that are listening too. Yes. So is there
I think the one thing, as you were speaking, that occurred to me that I often write when signing my book, I say, to teach is to learn, and to learn is to teach. And that's what you were talking about.
Absolutely. Yes, it's a beautiful reflection of, sometimes I don't have all the answers, and that's okay too. And just allowing natural play to happen, it unfolds. It unfolds, or having, the children just expressing in a different way, with removing all of the judgment or all of the it should be this way of ourselves. Because I know from personal experience as an educator for 17 years is that a lot of the times you'll recognize, okay, if it's risky play or they're going to climb that tree, it's that self-judgment of what if something happens or they get hurt, and that's on me. But coming at it from a different perspective, understanding the safeness, how can we create this safe for them to explore? They're going to use their problem solving skills, and children always seem to know what they need. They have this innate knowing as to what they need. So it's beautiful to be able to have that reflection from an educator and a parent standpoint as I move and grow and learn. And after X amount of years, I'm still learning so much each and every day through this, play-based model.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So if you had, one more piece of information or advice to tie up in a bow for our listeners today, Mary, what would that look like?
I guess one of the things I'd like to say for the listeners is hang out in the schoolyard playground, or hang out in a neighborhood park where there's some sort of equipment for children to play, because it's accessible to all of us. And in terms of self-regulation in these times, I'm fortunate enough, I live in downtown Toronto, and in 5 minutes I can walk to 3 playgrounds where children are. And I have to say that the joyfulness of children playing without any adult direction or correction is really, it buoys one up. It reminds one that the freedom of spirit of children when they run and they play is something that is in all of us, and we need to find it again.
Absolutely. I love that. I love playing. I love this conversation. And thank you so much, Mary, for coming on and speaking and inspiring as you do. Just want to share my deepest gratitude to you for coming and speaking with us today.
Well, my pleasure, and very good luck for your whole conference.
Thank you so much. Mary Gordon from Roots of Empathy, everybody. Thank you so much for watching.